Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The 5-7 model for the 12-team college football playoff gets approved earlier today. The boys thought it'd be a good idea to take a very early look at what a college football playoff could look like in this 2024 season, Dale. Spring ball hasn't even kicked off, starting to just play with some power rankings, some teams that we are higher on heading into the 2024 year, Dale. I know you don't totally agree what you see on the screen, so I know you're going to battle, but it's going to be a nice kind of start to the college football season. Talk about some teams, talk about what the college football landscape looks like. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys, and it has been over the last couple of weeks, taking these deep dives into these programs, kind of getting prepped for the spring and summer months. The amount of support you guys have shown the boys truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, this is my college football playoff, so I would love to hear from you guys. I know there's going to be a lot of disagreements. Would love to hear it in the comment section. We'll chop it up there. Dill, I'm going to give you the first crack here. Let's start with the conference champions. Georgia out of the SEC, Oregon out of the Big Ten, Miami out of the ACC, Utah in the Big 12, and then Liberty as that group of 5 team. How are we feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Georgia definitely agree with that. Just what they've kind of built themselves into. It feels like they are the preeminent dog now without Nick Saban, especially. You go into the season in the SEC, you look at Georgia, and then I think the real interesting conference is the Big Ten. And I'm kind of with you. I think early on, I'm looking at Oregon and Ohio State as the top 2. I think differentiating between them is tough. Again, Will Howard's kind of he's got to probably show us a little more than what he's shown us in college football at this point to think that they can keep up with a team like Oregon. But if he plays really good, that Ohio State team's loaded. So that's a 2-horse race for me. I think you could go either way. I'd probably lean Ohio State just on pure talent, but that's a tough one.
And you digging into the Big Ten, like Oregon and Ohio State, like those teams are making it to the college football playoffs. I feel pretty strongly about that. Now the seeding, whether who wins the conference championship, that's another question. We'll dive into that more, Dill. I am all aboard the Oregon Ducks bandwagon right now. I think they crushed it in the transfer portal. I think they've recruited really well. And you can just kind of get that feeling that program's going in the right direction. I think they check off a lot of boxes that you want, not just for a college football playoff team, but for a national championship team. Ohio State, you probably can say the exact same. Dill, the next one that I went back and forth, this list took me way longer than it should have been, and it started with the ACC. Like trying to figure out who's going to win the ACC, what ACC teams are going to make it in. Miami over Florida State. I think there are 3 ACC teams that you could kind of argue would win an ACC championship, that being Miami, Florida State, Clemson. Dill, I'm going with the Miami Hurricanes. I loved what I saw from that program in 2023 at every position besides the quarterback spot. And we all know that is the most important position on the field for winning games. Both Florida State and Miami bring in transfer quarterbacks. I just like what this Miami roster is around the quarterback a little bit more, and I take Cam Ward over DJU. I think I'm going to go with the Hurricanes, but I know you're going to push back here with Florida State.
I just think it's hard to immediately come back and say that Florida State isn't like kind of the dog there. And again, I think there is something to kind of turning the corner into becoming a truly winning program. I think Florida State over the last couple of years has been building into that program where you just trust them. Miami, I mean, as much talent as they had last year, there were still those moments where when it was time to show up, they made really poor decisions. Mario Cristobal made some horrible
decisions. That's what concerns me. Like just trusting Miami to go out and win 10-plus games and not throw in those games where you're just scratching the Georgia Tech game, right? You're hoping they don't throw those in.
Because in fairness, Miami right now, you're just looking like pound for pound talent. You probably do look at Miami and think that's a bit of a better team, perhaps. Again, I don't think it's as blatant as maybe you think it is, I feel like. But I do think Miami probably a little more talented. I just trust Florida State.
There's no blatancy with me. I mean, there's this not me. Like Miami, Florida State, that is so close. And I guess my closing argument, sorry to cut you off, the Florida State is Mike Norvell in this Florida State program. The Florida State listeners know how I feel about this program. I think it is trending in the right direction. I have them in the college football playoffs. The reason I'm taking Miami in 2024 is I think Mike Norvell is just a cycle behind on the recruiting trail. right? And they lose a lot of production from that 2023. And I'm not sure they have the young guys coming through that are going to be quite ready to kind of be that elite top 4 team that we saw them last year. I think that's what it comes down to. But again, you talk about Florida State 2025, 2026. You feel good about them. Dill, last conference we got to talk about are the Power 4, I guess you'd say. The Utah Utes in the Big 12. Going to take a little bit of getting used to saying that. I know you're a big Utah fan. How do you see the Big 12 playing out here?
I think Utah probably is the favorite. Getting Cam Rising back, I mean, he's the guy. Very excited to see what he can do. They are losing some guys on defense, but again, that's kind of a culture system. It feels like they lose guys, they bring in guys, and they replace them and they reload it. I do think it's not right to count out Kansas State.
That's the team.
Yeah. Is electric as they come.
And I would say, so you have Kansas State with Avery Johnson. You also have Jalen Daniels at Kansas. That is also a very good quarterback. I'm a little worried about Coach Koldnicki leaving for Penn State. Dill, the Big 12 is going to, because then you have Arizona with Noah Fifita and T-Mac. Yeah. That's a duo that's going to win a lot of football as well. If you were to tell me what team do I trust the most to stay consistent, not have any of those lapse games, it's going to be Kyle Whittingham, the Utah Utes, Cam Rising. Last conference champion that gets into Liberty. I'm just going to ride with Caden Salter. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you guys I've watched a ton of Liberty football, but I have watched a lot of Caden Salter. Caden Salter is that guy. I trust quarterbacks. Give me Liberty to be that group of 5 team coming into the college football playoffs. Getting to the next 7, Dill. We talked about Ohio State. The Texas Longhorns, if there's a team that is pushing Georgia in the SEC as it sits right now, before spring practice, looking at what they've done on the trail, what they have coming in through the transfer portal, what they have coming back with guys like Quinn Ewers, I'm leaning Texas as being the best team that doesn't win a conference championship.
Yeah, and I mean, Texas can challenge Georgia. I mean, Texas has built a roster that's talented enough to go toe-to-toe with anyone. Agreed. You saw how good some of those young guys played. The big question is can they get better in that pass defense? And that secondary, ultra young last year. Guys like Muhammad, can they take that jump and play really good football? That, to me, if they do that, I mean, they're hammers up front. On
my bigger question with Texas is
they got to replace defensive line.
I think their secondary actually might take some serious strides. I mean, you lose Tavondre Sweat, Alfred Collins, Byron Murphy, all 3 of which I think go in the top 150 in the NFL draft, 2 of which I think could be first-round guys. And so my question is, you look at Texas, the success they had last year, it started in the trenches. They're going to have a very good offensive line. That defensive line, can it be as dominant? Can it be that top 5 unit in 2024 that we saw in 2023? That's the question. If that is true, I mean, I am heavy on the Texas Longhorns. Talked about Ohio State. That's a loaded team. I think that's arguably the best roster in college football from a talent standpoint. Now, does it all come together? That's your question. Dill, next one up, Ole Miss. The listeners know, I am pounding the table for Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss. This is a year where they are pushing the chips into the middle of the table. How do you see Ole Miss in 2024 here?
No, I'd be really, really surprised if Ole Miss wasn't in the playoff picture, just because, again, you kind of said it. I think they've brought up the rest of that team to catch up to what they have. And in terms of how smooth they can be on offense, I think you saw them bring in enough defensive linemen who can play at that really high level. Walter Nolan, Princely. Guys who are, the difference makers. I just think they lacked at times on those 2 fronts. Brought in a couple nice transfer offensive linemen as well. But if they had the skill, they've always kind of had it. They have it as better than they've ever had. But I do think they've put enough around that team now to be more.
What it comes down to for me is, one, you added those difference makers, right? Lane Kiffin said, what is the difference between us and Georgia? It's we don't look the same as them on that defensive line. I think they're getting to that place. Dill, I'm all in on Jackson Dart. I think Jackson Dart made massive strides from 2022 to 2023. I was just doing a little nerd project, charting his throws. Jackson Dart was very good in 2023. What if he takes another step in 2024 in this Lane Kiffin offense? You have Trey Harris coming back. You add Juice Wells, who I think is one of the best receivers in the SEC. You're going to have a good run game. Caden Prescorn at tight end. This is an Ole Miss offense that I think can win both ways. I think they can win in the trenches, but if you want to go toe-to-toe and try to outscore them in a track meet, I think they can win there too. Next team we got to talk about are Michigan Wolverines. And this is, as a Michigan fan, like you feel confident, but it's hard to put them kind of solidly as that leader in the Big Ten until we figure out like what that quarterback situation looks like, and obviously replacing all 5 of your offensive linemen.
Yeah, and I mean, the offense, that's where the question is. Again, we just really don't know what they're going to be. You kind of feel okay about what they'll do at the offensive line. Have kept guys through the program, are going to have some juniors and seniors who you think are going to play really good football. But you're right, it's the quarterback position. I mean, they really didn't recruit that position outside of J.J. McCarthy, and then Jaden Davis coming in as a true freshman. You really don't know what you have. You don't have that kind of guy waiting in the wings. That battle is going to be interesting because, again, I don't think Michigan's maybe not the most predicated on having great quarterback play, but you need to have somebody who's not going to lose games.
It's hard to sit here in late February seeing a potentially a 5-man quarterback battle and say that this is a team that you are going to pick to win the Big Ten in a conference in the Big Ten that I think is absolutely loaded.
Because they got two hammers, Oregon and Ohio State. Like what they did in the offseason, they built themselves. They're taking cracks at it, both of them.
You have less questions about Oregon and Ohio State than you do Michigan. And again, the question mark you have at Michigan is at the most important position on the football field. That is
Michigan's got a defensive line that can take football games over. That's one thing I think people are drastically sleeping on. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, that's the best 1-2 punch defensive tackle-wise we've seen maybe since like Jalen Carter. And
that's why I have Michigan. I think they're going to be college football playoff team because that defense, it's still going to be very good. Like, yes, they lose a few guys. They return a lot of talent from that 2023 team, which was one of, if not the best defense we saw in college football. They're still going to win a lot of football games. It's still going to be Michigan. They're going to control the line of scrimmage. We'll wait and see what the quarterback position looks like through spring practice. The next one, and this was a team that I just missed on last year, kind of. LSU was super high on LSU. They couldn't figure out the defense. They had the best offense in the country. You bring in Blake Baker. You completely revamp the defensive coaching staff. I have LSU squeaking in, but I do have some questions. I don't really have many questions on the offense. I think they have one of, if not the best offensive line in the country. Nussmeier, I'm very confident about. They have weapons on the outside. They revamped the coaching staff on defense, but I look at the depth chart on this LSU defense, specifically on the defensive line, and I have some question marks. In a conference in the SEC where it's a line of scrimmage conference, I'm going to buy some LSU stock. I don't feel great about it.
Yeah, and honestly, one thing that I think LSU's got going for them is you don't have that same wrecking ball in Alabama, I don't think. In Alabama, again, we kind of have them on the outside looking in by a little bit. Kalen DeBoer is an awesome coach. I think they'll be explosive on offense, but you do have to probably wonder what Alabama will just be as the team because when you lose a guy like Nick Saban, things get shaken up. They've obviously lost a couple guys, but
I will talk about Alabama. I'm optimistic about Kalen DeBoer. I also have some question marks. We'll talk about it. Notre Dame, you inject Riley Leonard, who I think is significantly better than Sam Hartman. And y'all know Wake Forest guy. I love Sam Hartman. There was a reason he came back for a 6th year of college football. He just is not an NFL guy. I don't think he's a difference maker. I think he won a lot of games with a solid college quarterback. I think Riley Leonard has a very high ceiling. I think you retooled some wide receivers in the transfer portal as well. I think Riley Leonard is more of a difference maker quarterback, and that's what Notre Dame needs to crack the college football playoffs. I think they're a fringe team, but certainly a team that I could see making it in. Dill, I want to dig into Alabama, though, because there's going to be a lot of fans that have question marks about Alabama not being in the college football playoff. Here are my questions. The biggest one is Kalen DeBoer's offense. I don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be. Like, if you tell me Jalen Milroe is going to be running the Kalen DeBoer offense without Ryan Grubb, I have questions. And so Jalen Milroe is a quarterback that can make it work in specific offenses. I think you saw Tommy Rees tailor that offense to what Jalen Milroe could do. The X factor for Kalen DeBoer is the offense that he runs, that he knows. I don't know if Jalen Milroe can run that offense. Is it going to be Austin Mack? Is it going to be Ty Simpson? Not sure. But for that reason, I look at Alabama and say, I got some question marks about them heading into 2024.
Yeah, and that is the big thing is Kalen DeBoer doesn't necessarily have. I'm kind of with you. His quarterback and Jalen Milroe can run a good offense the way he runs it, but that's just not what Kalen DeBoer does. I'm not sure their offensive line is exactly that unit that's going to be able to like grind it out like that. I mean, they lose a couple guys, obviously. And again, I think they'll be solid, but when you play the way they played last year, they needed to play dominant football up front. When they played dominant up front, they were good against Georgia, for example. They were really tough. But when they didn't have that advantage, you kind of saw that offense was controllable. And it will be interesting to see if Kalen DeBoer can inject something into that unit to maybe take it over the top. Because again, I think they'll be solid on defense. They'll got to replace some guys in the secondary for sure, but it will be about that offense and can he marry his system in what's there?
I mean, the more I think about it, Alabama does have to. I mean, they're replacing their two starting tackles from last year, J.C. Latham and Caden Proctor. They are replacing their top two cornerbacks, Interior Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry. They replaced their top two edge rushers with Braswell and Turner. Those are players at significant positions, very important positions that they have to replace. Next team up, and Dill, I went back and forth with Missouri, LSU, Alabama. I like Missouri a lot. This is a team that I think can make the college football playoffs. It is not the flash that Ole Miss is right now, but you get Brady Cook back. You get Luther Burden back. I think Coach Drink is really building something special. You do lose Blake Baker. You lose a lot of talent on the defensive side of the football to the NFL draft. My question is, why can Georgia replace 10-plus draft picks every single year? It's because they recruit at that level. Has Missouri's recruit is going in the right direction. Don't get me wrong. This is a Missouri team that's going to be good for the next couple of years. Is it going to be? It's kind of that similar conversation you have with Florida State. Like there's a little bit of a gap in what they've done on the recruiting trail, and you might see that rear its head in that 2024 season. But again, Brady Cook, Luther Burden, I'm not excited about betting against those two guys.
Yeah, no, their offense is going to be great. No doubt about that. I think the X factor for me is development on the defensive side because it's not like they've been setting the world on fire recruiting before last year when I mean, they took that jump. They look like any other team in the or not any other team in the SEC. They look like they'd kind of surpass some of those other teams in the SEC and are getting closer to that Georgia, Alabama level than what they were before. I mean, again, you're going to lose some guys. That is probably the question, but I wouldn't count out development for a team like Missouri that looks like they're starting to put the culture in that you need.
The culture's there. I would play my 5'8", 150-pound tail off for Coach Drake. The culture's there. Penn State, it's a loaded big time. And Coach Goldnicki coming in is. I just have question marks about him fitting in with Drew at the quarterback spot. I like Penn State a lot. I don't know if there will be 4 Big Ten teams in the college football playoffs. I think there are a lot of teams that can get you in the Big Ten. And if Drew doesn't take that step going into year 3, for me, it's hard to see Penn State being a college football playoff team. But if he does take that step, and I hear in spring practice that he's putting it together, we're running this one back immediately because I do like what Penn State has.
The defense is unbelievable at Penn State, and I think it's going to be unbelievable again because you started seeing those reserve guys come in, rush the passer the same way. Yeah. Really good guys in the secondary, I think, who are young. Maybe didn't make enough plays in that Ole Miss game, but again, you can see the talent. They just need to get better ball skills, which kind of seems like it develops with age. I think Penn State, I think you might be sleeping on them a little bit. If Goldnicki can figure it out, they're going to be a hammer.
Losing Manny Diaz doesn't make me feel great either.
That does.
Oklahoma. This is a team that I am on board with a lot of different positions. I think Oklahoma's defense has the potential to be very good. Jackson Arnold, we just did an episode on that. I am very excited about Jackson Arnold. Dill, my biggest question mark is you have a first-year starting quarterback in Jackson Arnold playing behind a offensive line that almost exclusively kind of getting made in the transfer portal. I liked what they did. Is it going to be good enough in the SEC? That's my biggest question mark, right? I think Oklahoma has a very good team, but the combination of a new young quarterback in Jackson Arnold behind an offensive line that you might have question marks about, moving into the SEC that has the best pass rushers in the country, that's what concerns me about the Sooners heading into 2024. And that's why I'm leaving them out of the college football playoffs.
I'm kind of with you. I do. Again, the offensive line's the real question. I think their interior defensive line's a little bit of a question. I just think the aggregate physicality right now seems like it's still kind of bringing itself back up from the Lincoln Riley era. And I don't know if it's kind of right there where it needs to be to go like be really confident again them against like teams like Georgia and Alabama, who are, I mean, they're there. Like Alabama, still ultra physical, especially on that defensive line. You got to be ready to bring it. And I'm kind of with you. I don't know if Oklahoma's quite there yet.
Florida State, Missouri, Oklahoma are those three teams that I have question marks about 2024 specifically. I don't have many question marks about them moving forward. Like, I am high on those programs moving forward. I do have some question marks about about the 2024 year. Clemson, their defense is going to be sick. I'm doing my deep dive into Clemson, very high on their defense, a young defensive line that gets after it. And it comes down to this offense. Like a team that would have won the ACC last year, I think, had a very good shot at winning the ACC. Had they just gotten better quarterback play, had they had a more explosive offense. This was a Clemson team that lost all 4 of their games by 1 score or less and also averaged, 5.7 yards per play. That was outside of the top 100. And they were still 8-4. They were still extremely competitive in every single game. If Kate Klubnik takes that step going into year 3 with Coach Garrett Riley there, this is a very good team. I got to see it before I'm putting them in the playoffs.
Well, they're starting to turn into me that I'm not going to believe it at this point because, again, we've been talking about this with Clemson now for 5 years. It feels like, when are they going to turn this offense around? When is the quarterback play going to be good? I don't know what's going on.
Trevor Lawrence left.
Yeah, I don't have any answers, but, like, again, I don't really have a ton of faith that things are going to change just because, or I don't know, I have a ton of faith. They're just going to need to prove it to me before I get on board in the preseason because it's weird what's going on. I don't
if they drop 40 points, well, they play Georgia week one, so that'll be tough.
If they drop 40 on Georgia, then I'm all aboard.
Then I'm all aboard. I just need to see it from their offense. Arizona, I love Noah Fafita, T-Mac. Like that's college football is a wide receiver quarterback battery. Like that's part of the biggest part of the game in college football. If you have an elite quarterback, an elite wide receiver, and they have that chemistry that Noah Fafita and T-Mac do, you're going to have a dangerous team. Arizona has one of, if not the best wide receiver quarterback duo. They're going to be in it in the Big 12, 100%. I just don't know if the rest of the team around them with Jedd Fisch leaving is good enough. Texas A&M, man. I think people see Evan Stewart, Walter Nolan leave and just kind of assume that this roster stinks as if those were the only 2 players on this team. I am all aboard the Connor Wigman train. I think he is an absolute stud quarterback. He is a guy that I think can do some damage in the SEC. I guess the question marks there are just year 1, Mike Elko, a ton of transfers in. How well does it gel quickly? But this is a program that's going in the right direction. I do want to ask you about Tennessee because I'm sleeping on them a little bit. I know you're a bigger Nico believer than me. I'll let you get a chance to sell me on the Tennessee Volunteers.
Yeah, no, Nico's good. I think that defense is in really good shape. I love some of the young guys they have. I think they're going to be better than you think. Again, I'm not sure I'm picking them yet. I have a lot of questions about the offensive line. That's probably the one thing that they did add the transfer for sure, and that certainly helps. But just that starting 5 is probably your biggest.
Well, they lose a lot, but you do grab a guy in Lance Hurd that is an absolute dude.
And he'll come in and be a guy, but it's just like when you only have the one guy that you really feel comfortable about and not the position. Again, when you lose all 5 the way they did it, or lose that many off that offensive line, that's where the questions come. And again, I do like Nico. I thought the combination of his ability to move and his poise and his ability to throw it, I mean, they got something there, but yeah, preseason, you got to worry about what's going on.
It's kind of you kind of remind me of the Oklahoma. For sure. You got a year 2 quarterback, first year starter in the SEC. And then you have offensive line questions. Like that's not a good combination when you're talking about college football playoff potential. Last team we got to talk about, USC. I'll keep saying it till I'm blue in the face. This is a team that, it doesn't have Caleb Williams anymore. Miller Moss looked awesome in the game against Louisville. They're going to have an extremely talented offense around Miller Moss. I think the offense can give a lot of Big Ten teams problems with the speed and athleticism. The big bugaboo is the defense. Now, if you are on the Danton Lynn bandwagon, which I am, I think this USC defense takes some steps in the right direction. Is it enough to get them into the college football playoffs in 2024? I'm not sure. but there are some intriguing aspects about USC that I wanted to just throw them in there, mention them. Because if you have a Lincoln Riley offense, like, you're going to have a chance to be extremely competitive in a lot of football games. Last time I checked, Lincoln Riley still at USC. Defense with Dan Lynn, optimistic about. That'll do it. I mean, we left some teams off. At Kansas State, you kind of got at me for not including them. Avery Johnson, very, very exciting prospect. Obviously, the Washington Huskies with Will Rogers. A lot of different teams. We'll do individual conference breakdowns, kind of dig in more to this college football playoff landscape as it goes on. Wanted to talk a little bit about what it might look like in 2024. Screenshot this. This might be the exact rankings we see late December. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, it's been a blast talking ball with everybody. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.